Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Liberia History Channel on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jar, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In tonight's edition of the Liberian History Channel, we're going to be talking about our first Chief Justice. Yes, Samuel Benedict, the first Chief Justice of the Republic of Liberia. We started talking about, the last time we spoke about those cases, major cases in Liberian history. Oh, and then it came a time, okay, so let's take a back step. We
Mhm.
spoke about the executive presidents of Liberia. We did that. Now
Yes.
we're going to judicial, uh, the judiciary, and we're talking about the chief justices. We did an overview. This time we're starting with number one. That's Samuel Benedict. Invite your friend, share the show, and let's welcome our presenter, Carl Family. Carl, welcome to the Library History Channel.
It's always my pleasure to be here, representing Save the State Liberia and BAIO, the Liberia History Guild. This is gonna this section. A lot of people don't pay attention to our judiciary. They don't pay a lot of attention to our chief justices. It's usually not something that people think about in detail. And in fact, there's so little attention to detail paid to these people that there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation even around the chief justices. So we're going to try, our best to present, or I should say, I'm going to try my best. My student who was supposed to be here today isn't here today, but I'll try my best to present as much as I can about Sammy Benedict in a short amount of time, hopefully enough to spark people's interest in our first Chief Justice and one of our founding fathers of the Republic.
Thank you, Carl. And let me remind people, this is election season. People are talking about election, who won. Yeah, that's very important. But focus on Liberia is not, as my teacher used to say, one-way traffic. So we discuss everything. Today, we're going to be going into history. And history, the Liberian history, most of the time when we talk about government, every time we talk government, people's attention is drawn to the executive branch, the president, the cabinet. Not much attention is given to the judiciary as part of the government. So we're going to be talking about that part and chief justices. Carl,
Yes.
why is I don't want to say the role of the chief justice, but why is it important in governing? And why is it that we pay little or no attention to that part?
So, our judiciary, we have a beautiful legal system, and we've been taught that we borrowed this from the Greeks, but it isn't a Greek really in origin. And the oldest and most prolific example of a three-tiered government of checks and balances is rooted deeply, embedded deeply in West African culture of governance. This idea that you have an executive, a legislature of representatives, right? A legislature who represent the various areas that they come from within the nation. And then you have judges who are the last to speak and the ones who dispense law. And once they speak again, no one speaks after them, not even the birds in the trees chirp once the justices pass a ruling. This is very, very West African. And I will give you an example. Our traditional empires and kingdoms and chiefdoms, if we some people call them, I call them empires and kingdoms, had an executive, which is the emperor, the king, or in the case of ancient Wagadu, the Ghana, which is we call it ancient Ghana, but Ghana was actually reference to the king, the leader, the Ghana. And besides the Mansa or the Ghana, depending on whatever you call the whether it be Oduduwa in Nigeria or Mansa Musa in ancient Mali, the chief executive, the emperor, the king, would be equivalent or analogous to a president in a modern state. Each clandom or ethnic uh, uh, order within that empire would have a representative, a council member, a person that would represent their interest in a court of parliament of representatives from all of the regions of the empire, because these empires were very diverse ethnically and culturally. And then you have a very powerful, whether it be an individual or a group of very powerful individuals who have ascended to a sort of priesthood, men or women so powerful that their faces were never shown. These were the masked ones, the judges, that only come out when there's time to resolve conflict. They only come out when there's a serious problem that cannot be handled between the king and the representatives of the various areas of the region. And these people were the masked judges. In modern Liberia, we refer to them as the devil. They put in the devil aside. But in the tradition, really, these are masked judges. These are people that dispense judgment. And when they come out and they dispense judgment again, there's no more arguments. It is settled. That's it. So it really mimics our culture.
Wait, you
Mhm,
just said something very important. So those
mhm.
mass dancers, the one we
Not
call
dancers.
devil.
Not dancers. They don't
Yeah,
all dance. They
right.
don't all dance. Mhm.
Okay, yeah. Those ones we call devils. They are actually judges. They are coming to dispense justice.
Yeah, and I don't want these to be confused with the entertainers that we have,
Okay.
right? We have cultural entertainers, right? And they come out for celebrations. Those are the ones everyone can see.
Okay, yeah.
And they're not coming out to pass judgment or to render judgment, right? So these people or these beings, because they really mystify them in our ancient cultures, they only come out when it's time to dispense judgment. They come out in times of conflict. They come out to resolve issues. And they are respected, almost given a spiritual reverence, as if they are oracles, as if they're not even human. So, in this sense, and this is all over West Africa, this is not unique to Liberia. This is a very West African, ancient West African thing that is older than what any replica of it that you'll see anywhere else in the world. The judiciary, this concept, if you look at anthropology and the cultural anthropology of political systems, it is innately an African thing, especially a West African thing. So yes, the judiciary are the judges, and they're supposed to be the most wise ones.
Hmm. So in my head now, because I was born in the village. So in my mind now, because I'm looking at the like in my days, the chief has the executive. I'm looking at this the one we say the devil has the judiciary, and so maybe the council of elders has the legislative branch.
Yeah, and on a smaller scale, yes, right? But really, it's more analogous to empires.
Okay.
But yes, you can even see remnants of it or replicas
Right.
of it on a much smaller scale with some of these um, city states, these smaller political organizations, especially what we find in the eastern region of our country and in Ivory Coast, where you have very smaller autonomous groups of people. They still mimic some semblance of this, of checks and balances. There's never really been a situation where we have just an absolute power with no check, no balance.
Right.
That is very Asian, it's very European. We don't really see that in West Africa.
So now coming to our topic of the day, and in modern term now of the chief justice or the
Yes.
Supreme Court. Just walk us maybe a few sentences their role and how it compares to the other branches or the other people that we call government.
So
Just to
our
give us some
Supreme, yeah,
background.
our Supreme Court, of course, is governed by the Constitution. Until recently, they serve for life, and their role is judiciary. They are judges. They are there to interpret the law. They don't make law; they interpret it, and their interpretation of the law is law. I want you to think about that,
I
right?
like that.
Yeah, their interpretation of the law is law. They don't make law, but they interpret it, and their interpretation is the law. So imagine how incredibly wise you must be to
Right.
hold such a role and responsibility.
And that is powerful. I mean, if you
Yes.
make a decision, it's law.
If you make a decision, your interpretation, it's not that you're making law. I don't want it to be confused, right? The laws are passed, and these are the
Right.
ones that say, hey, these are the laws that are passed. This is why these laws were passed. This was the thinking of those who passed the law. And based on what we understand about the law, this is right, this is lawful, or this is unlawful. And their interpretation is not up for questioning. You cannot appeal their decision. That is it. So it is an extremely, extremely important rule.
Very, very important.
Yes.
This is our first slide.
Yes, sir. So what we're going to do really is we're going to look at all of the chief justices, just like we did with the president, and we're going to end with the Tubman era as we did with the presidential presentations. I'm not going to get into James Pierre, and we're not going to go all the way up to Chief Justice Yoon, though I adore her. She's a wonderful person, but I'm stopping at 1971, like I did with the presidential series, for many reasons.
So we have His Honor Samuel Benedict, His
Yes.
Honor John Day, His Honor Boston Drayton, His Honor Edward J. Roy, His Honor Cyrus Louis Parsons, His Honor Zechariah B. Roberts, His Honor James Archibald Tolliver, His Honor James Jenkins Dawson, His Honor Frederick E. R. Johnson, His Honor Louis Arthur Grimes, His Honor Martin Nemley Russell, His Honor Eugene Hemin Shiner, His Honor A. Wilson.
Yes.
And Carl, I've heard just few names here that I'm familiar with. Has and this is just to say that we don't pay attention to this thing. I know of John Day, E.J. Roy. I really until late I didn't know that he was ever Chief Justice until I
Well, we
started.
did his whole.
Yeah,
We did
until I
what,
started,
4 or 5 series on him.
exactly until the History Channel. I didn't know that. And then Dawson, of course, Louis Arthur Grimes, and Dash Wilson. The
Yeah.
rest, not many of us know them, but it's
And
good.
Martin Nimley Russell was not our first Indigenous Chief Justice. James J. Dawson was. A lot of people think Martin Nimley Russell was the first Indigenous Chief Justice. They are incorrect. James J. Dawson was. And you know that.
Yeah, 1848 to 1971.
Mhm. So that's what we're going to cover. But today we're going to do Samuel Benedict. And his picture does not exist on the slide. It's just a blurred out silhouette of a black man. I don't even know if you can see that, or maybe it just looks black on your device.
Yeah, just
There is a reason for this, a very good reason for this. When you do not have a photograph of someone or a image that was drawn in their likeness, you do not invent one, you do not borrow one, you do not take someone else's photo and say it's this person. We have struggled with this, with people doing this with the presidents, not really taking other people's pictures, but really altering their likeness to suit a narrative. And it's not a good thing to do. I always like to say, our children are watching, our children are watching. In this particular case, Samuel Benedict, I have not been able to find a photo of him because he passed away, he died before Augustus Washington went to Liberia and was taking the tin copper, photographs of the era of many of our presidents. So unfortunately, Samuel Benedict died before he could be photographed. And I'm sure had he lived long enough to meet Augustus Washington, being a prominent citizen, Washington would have photographed him. And I'm not sure if he was ever painted or sketched. Hopefully he was. We will find him one day. But at this point, there is no image of Samuel Benedict. He was the Chief Justice He was his honor Samuel Benedict was the first Chief Justice of the Republic of Liberia. He was in office from 1847 to 1854. He was appointed to that role by his political rival, Joseph Jenkins Roberts. And Samuel Benedict was born in Georgia in the year 1792. He lived a long life for a man of that time period. He died on the bench in the year 1854, around the month of April of 1854.
Wow. No
So,
picture.
no picture. But if you go to the judiciary website, the official website of the Judiciary of the Republic of Liberia, if you go to the next slide, if you go to their website, and there's a website there, judiciary.gov.lr/past-justices/, you are going to see a picture of a European man, European looking man.
Yeah.
According to the official website of the Judiciary of the Republic of Liberia, this is supposedly a photo of Samuel Benedict, the detractor of Joseph Jenkins Roberts. Samuel Benedict, who was born a slave in Georgia. Samuel Benedict, for all the records, do not even show him as having any European ancestry. Samuel Benedict is recorded as being a Black man. So we don't have his photo, we have descriptions of him. And here they are depicting him on the official government website as a European. So when I saw this, I said, where did they get this photo? This doesn't make any sense. It could not have looked like this. Based on everything that we've studied about him, there's no way he looked this way. So where did they get the photo? And go to the websites yourself. So I went and started digging, and this is where they got the photo. This is actually a photograph of a portrait, not photograph, but a portrait, meaning a drawing, of Charles Ewing by an artist called C. Clarence. It was dated in 1834. He sketched this man, this white man from New Jersey, in 1834. Ewing was actually born on the 8th of June, 1780. Right? So he was older than Samuel Benedict. He didn't live as long as Samuel Benedict either, because he died in 1832. He died before Benedict ever left the United States. And this man was from Trenton, New Jersey, and he was the Chief Justice, which is the only thing they have in common, but he was Chief Justice of the State of New Jersey Supreme Court. This is ridiculous.
What?
Yes, sir. This is who they have on our official government website depicting Samuel Benedict. I don't know why they did that.
So,
I mean,
so
this is the most.
that person now, where is that person photo, and where is it? Is there a website with?
Oh, you can just Google. I mean, this is the New Jersey Supreme Court. You could just put in his name, Charles Ewing, Chief Justice, New Jersey. It will pull him up.
EWIN?
EWING, Charles Ewing. I mean, he probably has a Wikipedia site. He probably is on the New Jersey Judiciary website, because this is people in America keep records of their people. But this portrait was obtained from the New Jersey, the State of New Jersey Historical Society. But I'm sure he's all over the internet, because this is a famous man. This is an American who served in a powerful position in the state of New Jersey, albeit a long time ago. His information is out there. So this is actually not Charles Benedict. It's Charles Ewing. I mean, it's not Samuel Benedict. It's Charles Ewing. Samuel Benedict was not white. He wasn't even mulatto. So this is just an outrage. Don't know why they did it.
Huh.
They did the same thing with John Day, but we'll get into that when we're doing John Day's presentation. Right now, we're focused on Sam Benedict.
Well, no, but this is very interesting, right? And I mean, you take. I don't even know how to start.
You take somebody else's picture. You put it on the official government website. Oh, you now pull it up. Yeah, see it. What is that? Wikipedia or something?
Yeah, with Wikipedia.
Yes, also the New Jersey Historical. I mean, this is who he is. This is not Sam Benedict, clearly. Yeah, so even you don't want to get even more official than that, go on the state of New Jersey official site because
Yeah.
they're competent.
I mean, I just Google his name and boom, this same picture.
Yeah.
Oh my
It
God.
really it isn't rocket science. We really have to do better. I mean, if you can't pay attention to just doing this correctly, imagine what they're doing with our education system. And this is the judiciary. This is the house of wisdom.
Hmm.
If you can have incompetence like this at that level, it's scary. We have work to do in Liberia. We got to do better. We can't always fake it till we make it. We've got to be serious about the work we have to do for our country. We can't just make up stuff. And this is the kind of carelessness and disrespect of our history, and disrespect of competence and processes and just being correct in the way you do things. It really is not that hard.
I mean, you see,
I'm an average person I'm not a genius. So, it really shouldn't be this difficult to do simple things like this correctly.
I told someone, I said, maybe this is the information our Ministry of Information need to be prioritizing instead of
Instead of propaganda, right?
right instead of propaganda because information is this is and you can't get the photo of someone correctly and you take somebody else's photo.
The
Why the
man
person?
doesn't have, as far as I know, he doesn't have a photograph because the time photography arrived, he died, he was gone.
Right.
By the time photography arrived in Liberia, right? He and Hillary Teague were not alive when Augustus Washington came and was taking all those photographs of Joseph Jacob Roberts and Stephen Allen Benson, all those people. He and Hillary Teague, unfortunately, had already passed away. The same with Elijah Johnson. So many of the founders of Liberia were deceased. Many of the founders of this country of our country were not, George Washington, when the United States wasn't photographed, photography hadn't been invented. What did they do? They painted portraits of him. So maybe it's possible someone painted our founders and we need to just look for those photos and see if they're in somebody's collection or museum somewhere. In the meantime, don't put a photograph there. And not force. This is
I know.
buffoonish and
If you want to
embarrassing.
if you want to put a photograph, maybe put my photo, put a Liberia, right? Why would you take
dress
a white person?
dress you up like one judge, right? And put your picture in
Yeah.
there. No, but I mean, we're making light of it, Dennis, but it's not funny. It's unacceptable. This is the face of our nation. We cannot be projecting this kind of buffoonery all the time. We have to be respectful of our country.
I am shocked, really.
I'm not. I've seen it a lot, right?
Wow.
I'm not shocked at all. I've seen this. You shouldn't be shocked. You've seen what we've done with our textbooks.
Yeah.
You understand? You've seen what we've done. So this is
Yeah, it's
normal for
something
us.
to take a portrait, like we've seen, and pin those people white, but to just go and get somebody else's photo. I mean,
I
how?
think it's all along the same lines. First of all, why a white man's photo? Why wouldn't you
Yeah,
get
why
a
white?
random black man's photo? That's weird. It's just weird. What are you trying to tell people that our first Chief Justice was a white man? Why would you do that? It's not true.
Wow.
It's not even true. It's just crazy. Does this man look like he was born into slavery to you?
So this is the Charles Ewan.
Yeah,
Nice. And this was even a portrait, not his own picture.
yeah.
Wow. He was born.
I mean, they just. So I don't know. Maybe because it says Chief Justice, and so they say, okay, we just put him there because maybe this is what our Chief Justice look like. I don't know why they did. I don't know the motive, but it's wrong and it needs to be removed from our website. It's embarrassing.
Right. Or just like when you're doing websites, sometimes you put a placeholder, right? To say, okay, let this be here until I find the actual picture. And nobody
No,
came
but
back
you can't do that. You can't do that with actual human beings.
and nobody came back to fix it.
I mean, why do that? Why have a placeholder there at all? All the other people, they did the same thing with John Day. They have a picture of John Day that isn't John Day. a second Chief Justice. They did the same thing with him. Everyone else is correct. So I don't know what the force was to put John Day in. If you don't have their photograph, you don't have their photograph.
You don't have it.
So we digress.
Yeah.
So here you have remarks of Bishop Scott when he went to Liberia in 1854, January. And he was kind of describing the scene in the church where he was preaching. He delivered his sermon. And you can go ahead and read this because there's very few descriptions of Samuel Benedict. But here's what he said.
Sabbath morning at length came, and at the sound of the church-going bell of the seminary, I repaired to the place of worship, and there, to a well-clad, well-behaved, intelligent assembly, preached my first sermon in Africa. From the text, "For the promise is to you and your children, and to them that are afar off, even as many as the Lord our God shall call." I said it was an intelligent audience. I will describe it. There sat the president of Liberia and his wife, each having a Bible and hymn book, and this was the case with all present. Yonder on the piazza, just beyond, sat the vice president, a Methodist preacher, having taken that position on account of feeble health. Just beyond the pew in which sat the president and his lady was the tall and fine looking figure of Chief Justice Benedict. And there, said the bishop, pointing in another direction, sat the Speaker of the House of Representatives, both Methodists. This remarks of Bishop Scott, January 28, 1854.
Yes. So this is amazing, right? We know that he was tall. We know that he was a good-looking man, a good-looking figure. We also know that he was not mulatto. He was not light-skinned because it was Samuel Benedict, this tall, handsome man, who challenged Joseph Jenkins Roberts to the presidency. He was the detractor. He was the original anti-establishment candidate. He was also the head, the president of the Constitution Convention that signed our Declaration of Independence and also drafted our first Constitution. Samuel Benedict was of the stock of Lot Carey. These were these men, these black men who were born into slavery. Now, Lot Carey, though he was not photographed, he was sketched while he was alive. So it is very possible that Samuel Benedict was also sketched while he was alive. I haven't come across his likeness, and I will dig until I find it if it exists. But like Lot Carey, he was born into slavery and there's two accounts. One says that he was just liberated and removed to Liberia. Another account says that he bought his freedom, meaning that he had to do extra work to earn his freedom. So His Honor Chief Justice Samuel Benedict was not born free like Joseph Jenkins Roberts. He was not born and raised in privilege like E.J. Roy. He was from a very poor, in fact, he himself was property. And he went to Liberia without much, but he was of exceptional intelligence, as they describe him. So he pursued his education with everything he had. Because of the limitations of his early upbringing, he was described as someone who had a thirst for knowledge. This is a person that built himself up. It gives me a lot of understanding about why he would have been placed as the president of the Constitution Convention. It also makes me understand very clearly why he would have had the kind of audacity to stand up to the ACS when they wanted to know what was going to happen to their property, meaning the land that they had procured through treaties with indigenous people and through conquest of the slave barracoons. And Samuel Benedict famously said, that was not on our agenda. We were sent to draft a constitution. And those words were so powerful. You're talking about a time period when people were still living in bondage. The United States still had its grips on human beings. Chattel slavery was still in the West. And here's this African man telling these people, this African American born Black man telling these people, basically giving them cheek. Your land business was not on our agenda. They literally wrote the ACS ownership of anything in Liberia out with the 1847 Constitution by making it that you had to be a citizen of Liberia to own land and you had to be Black. And then further, to add insult to injury, between those men who went to the Constitution Convention, they made it illegal for ACS to go and sign any new treaties with indigenous people or any Liberian to sign treaties with indigenous people. So you cannot even buy any additional land in the territory. Not only don't you own the land that already exists, you can't acquire any more because you're not allowed to take the land, any more land from indigenous people. That was powerful. That was powerful, and it was way before its time. This is who these men were. So the reason we still have our land rights in Liberia is because of people like this. Because, otherwise it would have been like what happened in our neighboring countries, to just go in and sign treaties and take over the whole place.
Yeah.
Great foresight, and they understood the modus operandi of the Europeans and the Americans because they had witnessed it. They witnessed the so-called treaties to get territory in the United States. They witnessed the treaties to get territory in Sierra Leone, and they knew about it, and they said it's not going to happen here, and they were right in making the decisions that they made. So this talks about Samuel Benedict. This is from the Methodist Reporter. It's a missionary journal, and this was published. Anyway, you can go ahead, Dennis.
Right. And it reads, on the 29th of June, the ship Yeyia sailed from Savannah with 63 or 65 immigrants for the settlement formed at Bassa Cove by the United Auxiliary Societies of New York and Pennsylvania. The disastrous circumstances of that settlement caused them to sojourn at Monrovia, where they arrived on the 19th of August. The improved condition of the affairs of the society has determined the managers to dispatch a vessel during the present month to the colony with immigrants and supplies, and instructions to that effect were sometime since given to the agent at Norfolk, from which port it is intended that the vessel shall sail. She will carry about 100 immigrants, of whom 42 are manumitted slaves, and 2 are children brought from Africa.
So basically, this was a ship that was bringing mostly recaptured or a couple of recaptured Africans, enslaved people who had just been liberated from plantations. And these were not people who were liberated. He was not liberated from being like some kind of, he was being liberated from a plantation. This is much different than the story of other founding fathers.
Yeah.
You have, Elijah Johnson, who fought in the War of 1812. He was a decorated U.S. war veteran when he went back to Liberia. You had Hilary Teague, who was a trained clergyman, a reverend, a missionary. You had Lot Carey. All of these early people were really exceptional. There's not a whole lot. This man went to Liberia with a thirst for knowledge and didn't really have the access to, even though Lot Carey was born a slave, when he was emancipated, he was groomed through the church. So Lot Carey was educated in theology. They did also educate Sam Benedict in theology, but not to the extent. He really got his education through struggle, even in Liberia, apprenticeships and things like that. So this is very important. And he was still able to think at a level and even be president of a constitutional convention with the most educated people in the country. And he headed it. So you should understand his kind of natural ability, his courage, really. What they did in signing that Declaration of Independence and creating that constitution, protecting land rights, was very courageous. And here's this is, talking about they were having the issues at Bassa Cove. We all know in 1834, there were those wars going on to stop the slave trade there at the time when he arrived. They couldn't land there because they were fighting to stamp out the slave trade and redirecting to Monrovia. We can go to the next slide. So Sam Benedict, this is the ship in Indiana's manifest. Came from Savannah, Georgia, arrived in Monrovia on August 19, 1835. And if you remember, it sailed on June 29. So it didn't arrive until the 19th of August of 1835. So almost 2 full months it took to get to Monrovia. And Sam Benedict was recorded he was 43 years old when he arrived. And he was older, right? He was older. So even being president of the Constitution Convention, he was the oldest person. And then you have James Benedict, which is presumably his son. Some believe it might have been his grandson. I think it was his son. And he wasn't able to bring anyone else with him. The plantation slave. What you see with a lot of the mulattoes who are returned, they go with their entire group because they're usually the biological relatives of their owners. Yeah. Like in the case with the Russell family or the Uries, they're usually the biological relatives or descendants of the slave owners. In this case, he was only able to take one small child with him. Imagine that. You know, a 5-year-old. He takes his 5-year-old son. Imagine what that was like. There were others liberated from the plantation. The Savage family was also. So if you see, none of them were born free. That's why there's lines there. And they were emancipated in view of immigrating to Liberia by William Savage, Esquire. So all these people with the Savage name, there was more on the list. I just didn't, put everybody there. There's about, I think about 8 or 10 of them. They all took William Savage's name, not because they're related to him, but because they were his property. But Sam Benedict named himself and named his probably his son, James Benedict. In fact, I do see accounts where James Benedict is supposed to be Sam Benedict's son. So I'm just gonna roll with that. Any questions here?
No.
Okay. And I want you to look at where it says, extent of education. It says he writes and whatever. Profession, it's blank. He didn't have a profession. He was he worked on a plantation. And he didn't want to be a farmer, right? He's a plantation hand. He's like, I don't want to be a farmer. I'm going to go to Liberia. I'm going to be an intellectual. I'm smart. He ended up being a farmer anyway. He had one of the nicest coffee plantations in Liberia. He started brewing the Liberica coffee, the sweet coffee that grows naturally in our area, that's named after our country because it's the first. It was first discovered in Liberia. So he was exporting the Liberica coffee. That's how he made a living for himself and his son. It was by growing coffee.
So he writes. We don't know. I wonder what was his level of education at 43.
So he ended up doing apprentice law, and he ended up becoming a lawyer. So when at 43, I don't know how much he had learned by the time he arrived in Liberia, but upon his arrival in Liberia, that was his main focus, was to become educated, and for his son to become educated.
I mean, that's interesting. At 43, he was not young anymore.
No, but this is just to make a point. I mean, it's not that he was completely illiterate, but he was still ambitious and wanted to. When people are naturally intelligent, they tend to want to advance their knowledge as much as possible. And in the 1800s, it was normal in the United States and in Europe for people to become educated informally, especially if they're poor, and especially in the early 1800s.
Yeah.
So we've seen this on the History Channel many times, but it's the signatories of our Declaration of Independence. There he is, S. Benedict, the president, you know, and the rest of the people. He was representing, Montserrado County, even though he was originally supposed to have settled in Gaza. They were trying at that time to settle a lot of the plantation slaves and recaptured Africans away from Monrovia. But because they had a conflict, he was redirected to Monrovia, which was with fate at the time, because that's one of the reasons he was able to become educated, because he had the opportunity to apprentice.
Yeah.
And we know about Elijah Johnson, and we'll talk about John Day, who was the second Supreme Court justice, when we get an opportunity to do that.
The True Whig Party is a very old one, comparatively speaking. It attended the present Republican Party of the United States. Its principles were brought to this country by immigrants who came here between 1847 and 1856, about the time its name was famous in the political history of America. Its first great leader or champion in Liberia was the Honorable S. Benedict, who was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Liberia. Before coming to this country, he was a slave of William Savage of Georgia, but was manumitted and came hither through the assistance of your society on the ship Indiana, which arrived at Monrovia on the 19th of August, 1835. He was president of the convention in 1847 that adopted the Declaration of Independence as well as the Constitution of Liberia.
So, it goes on, but do you have any questions for that before I go on? Because it really,
No,
this is,
where is this coming? Where is this coming
so
from? Who's writing it?
R.A. Wright, who was an African American, he wrote this on the 8th of May, 1899. And he was a senator. And he's writing this, and he's a true Whig partisan, staunch true Whig partisan. And he is looking at Samuel Benedict as being he's trying to present Samuel Benedict as being the founder, really, or the inspiration is a better word, for the True Whig Party.
Yeah.
Mind you, Samuel Benedict was not alive when E.J. Roy created the True Whig Party. But it's very interesting what he's writing in 1899, 50 years after Benedict's death. He's reciting this story. Wright actually emigrated to Liberia after Sam Benedict died, but I found his words to be very interesting and very credible, because it goes along with a lot of narratives. Now, I want you to read the following two slides, and then it'll kind of paint the better picture of it.
He ran for the presidency as a Whig against J.J. Roberts, the first president of Liberia. But being defeated, some say counted out, he was appointed by President Roberts to the high position of Chief Justice. About this affair, an anecdote is related, which it said gave the motto to the True Whig Party. It is said that Mr. Benedict was actually elected president, but he was counted out in favor of Mr. Roberts, on account of which Mr. Roberts said to Mr. Benedict that if he would not push his claim to the presidency any further, he would commission him Chief Justice. Mr. Benedict seemed no doubt Mr. Roberts' sincerity, Obash, said he, you are talking only to hear yourself talk, Mr. President, for I'm sure you are an adept at words. Their conversation ended for the time being. In a few days afterwards, President Roberts called on Mr. Benedict carrying in his hand a parchment. What is that you have in your hand, Mr. President? Inquired Mr. Benedict. It is your commission as Chief Justice, replied President Roberts. That being true, Your Excellency will allow me to retract the remarks I made to you the other day, said Mr. Benedict, for I find you to be a man not only of words but also of deeds. From that day to the present, the motto of the True Whig Party has been deeds, not words. R.A. Wright, May 18, 1899.
I mean, was there a little bit of embellishment? How would he know what the conversation was? Clearly, this is oration passed down, right? It's 50 years later. But I think there's some truth to it because just how people held Elijah Johnson in high esteem for defending the territory, it's the same way they held Samuel Benedict in high esteem. And I was joking with our students, with our mentees, and I was saying he seems like he was the original progressive. He seems like he was probably the most, because he was very much against. They called him an anti-establishment candidate. I don't believe he referred to himself as a Whig in 1847. I think that was just um, Mr. Wright's Senator Wright's what is the word I'm looking for, projection of the current language on the past. I don't believe he referred to himself as a Whig at all. And in fact, being at that period in history, he would have been considered just an anti-establishment person,
Yeah.
meaning the country was really, it was Republican. Roberts had been the governor of the ACS, and his candidacy was supported heavily by ACS, even though they couldn't vote and they no longer had property rights. They felt Roberts would at least, support their economic interests. And Samuel Benedict was like, no, these people need to go. They are a cancer.
In today's
So
language, anti-establishment will be equal to opposition.
I disagree because I don't think that the political parties in Liberia have any
Establishment.
disagreement on ideology. The difference is on competence. The difference is really about competence and what clique you belong to, which is why people can easily hop from one party to another because they don't believe in anything.
Or they all believe the same thing.
They don't believe in anything, and I mean that because if you look at the reasons people join political parties, we have not heard those things articulated. Everyone just talks about we need roads, we need healthcare, development. They don't even talk about things in any tangible way. These people talked about things in tangible ways. Samuel Benedict wasn't just anti-establishment because he wanted to be president. He was anti-establishment because he wanted the ACS out of Liberia. He wrote them out of the Constitution. So he and Hillary Teague and Elijah Johnson, these people wrote Lewis. These guys wrote these guys out of the Constitution. And here's Roberts, still being the ACS golden child. So the ideology was we need our independence, our actual freedom. We need to sever ties with these people. They are oppressive and they're exploiting us. That is an ideological difference. Where Roberts was like, oh, we need them. They're our friends. CDC, Unity Party, Liberty Party, the Broom Party. Everybody believes that the West are their allies and, they got to do what America says. I have not seen anyone that has diverted from from, in fact, all of them would be considered establishment parties, in my opinion. The only thing that they really disagree on is not what, but who. That is not ideological. They don't believe in values, they believe in people. And that's a degeneration from what was in the past. So they're not supporting an ideology, they're supporting a candidate. And that's not really what political parties are about. They're not supposed to be about people. They're supposed to be about thought processes and solutions and value systems and ideologies. But in the case of Liberia, everybody has the same values. They all believe the same thing. It's just not what, it's who. So when I say they don't believe in anything, I mean their differences have more to do with
individuals.
The differences have more to do with who should lead, not not the direction we should be going to, but who should lead.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we evolve out of this, because that's very degenerate, compared to where we were in the past.
A few months after February 25, 1854, the people of Liberia were called to mourn the loss of Honorable Chief Justice Benedict, a name very generally known at home and abroad. The judge was undoubtedly one of the most enterprising, public-spirited, and useful citizens of the Republic, exceedingly benevolent, even perhaps to a failing.
Yeah.
He died. Oh, poor Benedict. He was highly respected by his fellow citizens as a jurist and politician. When a memorable convention of the colonists met in the year 1847 for the purpose of drafting a constitution for the new form of government, Honorable Samuel Benedict, being considered the most suitable of their number, was chosen president, which place he filled with a dignity and wisdom not unbecoming his position. He was twice candidate for the presidency of the Republic, but fortune did not favor his elections. Notwithstanding, in his death, Liberia has unquestionably sustained a very serious loss.
Yes. He was respected. I have a theory. I have a theory
Lay it on me.
about why Stephen Allen Benson was the second president of Liberia. Roberts was so disturbed by the momentum and the force that was behind, the force of support that was behind Samuel Benedict. Because you have to remember, a majority of the voters look like me, look like you. And they didn't want Roberts to be president. They respected Roberts. Roberts was very respected. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this guy was respected. But there was an element, which was the majority of the people felt that the president should look like them. There was some of that. And there's a reason we've only had two mulatto presidents in the history of Liberia, Russell and Roberts. But Roberts looked at Stephen Allen Benson, and he put his weight behind Benson, who defeated an elderly Samuel Benedict. Benedict was old, and Benson was a very young man when he ran for president. And Benson was a doctor, very educated. So they were marketing Stephen Allen Benson far more educated than Samuel Benedict, younger, more vibrant. Benedict's too old to run the country. There's too much to do. He's not going to be able to handle it. And so, but as we know, Stephen Allen Benson also looked like you and myself. The son born in America of recaptured Africans. So he appealed to the people. He was born free. He wasn't born a slave. Didn't have that stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And so Stephen Allen Benson was able to defeat him and become the second president. And my theory, the theoretical part, that part was all fact. But my theory is that they pushed Stephen because of his complexion, because he was dark.
Yeah.
That's my theory. That's the theoretical part. I didn't read it anywhere, but it makes sense if they were pushing to not have, these mulatto merchants in power, because majority of the voters look like you and myself. And so this argument that they had a mulatto hegemony until I'm starting to understand where that confusion comes, because they start attributing that to E.J. Roy when they really should be trying to attribute it to Samuel Benedict. So there is that misinformation is rooted in some truth, which occurred earlier between different people. Because we know E.J. Roy came in after the Republican Party, but we've already been able to prove that all of those Republican presidents were dark, except for Roberts. And of course, Russell, Alfred Francis Russell was a Truig. Our other mulatto president was a Truig. So this is my belief about Benedict. And also, by the time Samuel Benedict ran for president the second time, the reason Stephen Allen Benson, besides him being so likable, he became president he was the second president of Liberia from 1856 to 1864. He stayed president for quite a long time, I mean, from 56 to 64. Stephen Allen Benson was more likable. He was much younger. That's what it was. So
Yeah, that's what politicians do. You find someone who can defeat your opponent,
yeah.
even when you're leaving. Death of Chief Justice Benedict.
Yeah, so this is just another account of his obituary that was published at the time in the Monrovia Herald, but you can go ahead.
It reads, from a letter from the Reverend J.W. Horn, principal of the Monrovia Seminary, to the corresponding secretary of the Missionary Society of the M.E. Church.
Of the Methodist Episcopal Church.
Yeah, we learned that the Honorable Samuel Benedict, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the Republic of Liberia, died at Monrovia the 25th February last. Mr. George Benedict immigrated from Savannah, Georgia in 1835. On the establishment of the Republic in 1847, he was placed by President Roberts in the honorable and responsible position of Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which he filled with credit and ability to the time of his death. At the election in May 1853, he was the regularly nominated anti-administration candidate for the presidency, but was defeated by his more popular opponent, whose services a majority of the people were unwilling to dispense with. His last illness was protracted and painful, but as Mr. Horn writes, he appeared submissive and patient, and fully aware of his approaching dissolution. He died in the faith and hope, I trust, of the gospel.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I wanted to correct something. When he ran for the second term, Roberts, he actually was running against Roberts, but Roberts used Benson, who had been his vice president, to campaign against him. And after Roberts' term, he awarded Benson with the support to the presidency. So that was not correct. So Roberts was actually the opponent the second term, and Benson was pushed in front because of his appearance. Because again, he was dark-skinned and was pushed in front to do the campaigning and to do the court, for people to say, oh, but, Stephen Allen Benson, is a better support system for, whatever it was. And thereby undermining Samuel Benedict.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, we've seen that kind of thing before. But that concludes the presentation. Do you have any questions, anything I didn't cover?
No, but did I know what was his what were some of the cases that he or what were some of the things he did as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court?
Yeah, that was gonna be, that's why we condensed it, but those were the slides I deleted from the presentation. Just to keep, for the sake of time, he had a quite a few important deciding cases. Many of them had to do with various crimes that were committed. We had disputes within the colony about um, property rights, tariffs. So a lot of the cases that were argued during his tenure, murder cases, which were very interesting, that people appealed and were still condemned to death. We had the death penalty in those days by hanging. There were cases of lawsuits, corporate lawsuits between traders, Liberian business people, kind of having conflicts that went all the way to the Supreme Court. People suing very powerful people, and that made it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they won against very ordinary people suing powerful people. So Samuel Benedict was a very good Chief Justice. Um, Most of the cases that he decided, I believe, are cited by the law school today because they once were. So, if you want us to do another show where we cover specifically his cases, we certainly can. I just wanted to kind of humanize the
Right.
Chief Justice and kind of, let people know who he was, who His Honor Samuel Benedict was, and then also to categorically, debunk this idea that a white guy should be his likeness on the website.
Yeah. No, we started with some of those cases which we ran through.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
think we can go to John Day next. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you just joined us, this is the Liberia History Channel. Our topic today is on the first Chief Justice of Liberia, Samuel Benedict, His Honor. And if you want to join the conversation, comments, or question, please call the number on the screen 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403 pound. Let me see. We don't have any here. So if there's no question, I'll be monitoring the, else we can conclude.
Yes.
Let's do a summary now and then set the stage for the next Chief Justice.
Yeah. So there's no callers, no comments. Oh, it's boring today. Oh,
Yeah,
hey, the presidents, they were all
there are
seated
some
and
comments.
hyped.
Let me read some
Okay.
comments that our viewers, uh, Jimmy Weeks, when we're talking about the picture, it says so annoying.
It is, Jimmy. It's very annoying.
It's wrong. So powerful. What a cheeky statement. Your land was not on our agenda. So,
Yes. It was not here. We didn't go to discuss your land business.
Michael said he seemed to be interested in law early on. His former slave master was an attorney.
Yeah, I did. That's correct.
Mhm. That's why he has that. Yes. And Michael is saying Tobias outlined sharp James H. Stevens in Sino. Benedict defended outline in court. Could this be a reason he lost the first presidency to Roberts in 1847? He also ran in 1852 and lost.
Yeah, we covered that.
Yeah, he said because he defended that president, maybe that's why made him unpopular. Since this,
Yeah, he defended. So he was a just justice, right? There was not a bias that if you were his rich and powerful friend or a rich and powerful person in the society and a smaller person who may have lost in the appellate courts, right, would reach the Supreme Court and know that each person carried the weight of justice equally, regardless of their status in society. So even if lower courts ruled against you and you could get your case to the Supreme Court, justice was sure. He set that precedent for chief justices and associate justices to follow. So you have cases upon cases in Liberia where injustice is the injustice is made right when it reaches the Supreme Court. They have ruled in so many powerful cases against people who today in society I'm not sure would get justice against powerful people. There was a young boy who was living, or as a servant in the home of a wealthy repatriate, or so what people call settler woman, and she must have been insane because she tortured this little boy to death.
Hmm.
The little boy died, and the community people, turned her over to the law and said, "Hey, she killed this child." So they said she was punishing him. You have to remember some of this kind of abuse trauma. They passed it on. So she appealed and said, "No, she didn't kill him. She's not responsible for his death. He was a sickly child, and she was just punishing him, and he just died by himself." Well, when it got to the Supreme Court, evidence that had been suppressed because nobody wanted to see this woman hanged because they executed murderers in those days. They still execute murderers in many places in the world. We just stopped doing it in Liberia. Nobody wanted to see this woman hanged for some little peasant child that nobody cared about. But when that case reached the Supreme Court, she was condemned to death. Her life was taken because her life was of no more value than the child she killed. That was powerful. We've had cases recently, when I say recent, I'm talking about in our recent lifetimes, where a child was killed by a couple whose name I'm not going to mention here, but you all know who I'm talking about. And this little girl's death, went in vain. Those people were allowed to leave Liberia and come and live a normal life. They were not condemned to prison, certainly not condemned to death. It happens all the time. We need to bring back that law, that system of law and order and justice. People should be punished for their crimes, no matter who the victim is. And that is why I think for me it's important to focus on these chief justices and let people know that Liberia hasn't always been the way it is. There was a time when people actually got justice.
Thank you. Let me announce tomorrow we're going to have now in our political discussion, Joseph Newman Boakai wins. We are concise. Now what? What are the next steps? And tomorrow at 6, you're going to have this show. Look, these are the things we're going to be looking at. What does the election results say about the Liberian voter, about the NEC, and where does the country stand currently? People say, are we divided? Is it based on ideological lines or on what? What is responsible for the Weird loss or the Boakai victory? And what do we expect going forward? The transition, during the transition, and the new government. What will it look like? Join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on Focus on Liberia. You love politics, we give you politics, but we give you history too. All right. All right.
So
There is no caller. Let's conclude call. Any final thing you want to say before we draw down?
yeah, just we'll pick up on John Day, of course, next week, and I'm excited. I love the fact that you asked for cases, so I'm going to try to keep these condensed to about an hour, so they're not going to be as long as the president. So I will put a case. Decided I'll find one or two from John Day, not just tell his life story, but also maybe putting one of those cases in there would make it important. And similarly, John Day's photo is not his photo. So just a little heads up. Supreme Court people or people of the judiciary running the website, please remove the photo of Samuel Benedict and John Day. That is not who they are.
Yeah. And yeah, we're gonna really call on the Supreme Court and those taking care of their website to please don't do that to us. Yeah.
The House of Wisdom. Yeah, that's not okay. But congratulations, Liberia. Your votes were counted, and congratulations on the new administration. Um, and hopefully we just keep moving forward, and the future's bright.
Yeah, thank you. Also today, a friend of this station who was a personal friend also, Siada Townsend, was laid to rest. We are focused on Liberia, extend our heartfelt condolences to
Yeah.
the family. We are
Wish you
Siada
rest
was
in
a
peace.
friend here and appear on Focus on Liberia a couple of times, and it was a regular regular uh, listener. I also learned today, I don't know how true it is, so I'm not going to say it, about one of our legendary folk musician in Liberia who you say passed, but I've seen the announcement all over Facebook today of, we call him Professor Jones Dopo.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah,
I hope
he's
it's not true. I haven't seen anything official by the media yet.
right. There is no official. It's all posted because we have him or his music on Focus on Liberia, and so people are posting rest in peace who are follow up, and I saw a lot of posting on Facebook that he's passed. I hope that's
Amen.
true. Yeah. All right. Again, thank you, Carl, for tonight. I want to thank our viewers. I want to thank Save the State BIO and the Academy, everyone who has helped to contribute in any way or the other to the History Channel. We say thank you so much. We are building this library, and even if 10% of the population reads it now, we know that you're going to have it. It's going to be in your face. We want to thank our viewers for watching, and even if you're not watching now, those who will watch later, always focus on Liberia. And that's what the song says, from Cape Mount to Cape Palmas. We want to elevate,
Yeah.
educate, and promote all things Liberia. Until then, we close with our song that says, "We are all Liberians." Have a good
Thank
night.
you,
God
Dennis.
bless
Good
you.
night, everyone.
We all have been